from our speakers. And I know this room can have this, hopefully most of you have a good sight line, and if you have a little challenge, there are these spaces up front, so please move as needed if you can't see things well. So we're going to start off at a high level at the state and move through all the way down to how we're actually building our houses for that, and everything in between. We're going to then have about a half an hour where we're going to have some Q&A. So you hopefully have a little note, take some notes on that. We're going to go through all our presentations. If there's a quick clarifying question, we can ask that after each presenter. Sometimes they brought up a new concept that folks may not be completely clear on, but we're going to really have most of our Q&A at that one chunk. And then we have a little survey, we have our raffle, which I hope you guys got signed up for the air, what's it called? Purifier, right. Then we're gonna have lunch outside and or in here, so that'll be lovely. And then there's gonna be a tour afterwards, and if you're attending that, that'll be great. And that'll go till 2:30. Okay, so without further ado, I'm gonna turn this over to Andy Pease. She's with Inbound Green Consulting. She has been a speaker here with the 3C-REN on multiple cases, and she's gonna lead us through thinking about what code changes are going to impact us at the state level coming down to us. So Andy, go away.
Awesome, thank you so much. Super glad to be here. And again, from here on out, our next four panelists have some really awesome slides. So if you can't see them, there's probably 8 or more chairs that are sitting in these other areas. So feel free to relocate if you want. So I'm an architect. I'm with Inbound Green Consulting, and super pleased and proud to partner with 3C-REN on a whole lot of energy performance, energy code types of topics. So I'm going to talk about some state legislation and how the overlap with the energy code and fire home hardening is super helpful, that they work together and play together nicely. As a reminder, Title 24 is our entire building code, and so the section that we focus on a lot is Part 6. Somehow we have co-opted the name of Title 24, but the whole thing is Title 24. We're trying to stress energy code. We also work in the Part 11, which is the California Green Building Standards. Those then in turn start to hang out with the building code, the residential code, the fire code, and now 2025 new wildland urban interface code. So wildland urban interface, and that's WUI. So we're going to be talking about WUI a bunch throughout the day, and so that's what we're talking about now. We have its own part of Title 24. Okay, so the first thing we want to touch on kind of briefly is the AB 130, which is the change to the building code cycle. And this started out in California. As we all know, there's a crisis of affordability and availability. So the state has been looking at all kinds of ways to be able to unlock the potential for developers to create more housing and more housing that has affordability as part of it. And so mostly it's been in the zoning world, but they also thought, it seems like this whole building code changing every 3 years, getting more and more stringent, more requirements, maybe that is holding us back. Now, the energy code always has to have a cost effectiveness analysis, so we're not allowed to have an energy code that doesn't pay back over the life of that building, but there is potentially some upfront costs. So it started out as AB 306, and then there was a whole lot of back and forth because the first version was pretty frightening. It said, like, we're not even doing the 2025 code. Nobody can change anything. And so there's been this evolution, got folded into AB 130, which is got approved and signed into law. And what that says is 2025 code will go into effect. Okay, that was dicey. So that's going into effect, but what happens is in the residential code only, we're just skipping 2028. So hope you love this current code that's coming online because we got it for 6 years. Non-res is going to go on as usual, and then we'll be back at it in 2031, which would take effect in January of 2032. Not a requirement, just that we are allowed to. Okay, so there's a bunch of exceptions and clarifications. One is it just says residential, so building standards put out a bulletin and said, we take that to mean all our occupancy, single family, multifamily, if it's residential, that applies. You're still allowed to do clarifications, administrative changes, things like that, that make it just better. A part of the target of this was about local REACH codes, and so in this case, the REACH codes, what they said is, if you already have a REACH code, you're allowed to update it for the new code as long as it doesn't get more stringent, okay? So that was important because a lot of cities, that's part of their climate action plan. It also says if you already have in place your general plan includes, as part of its strategy for climate action, climate response, if it includes that, building energy performance and a REACH code are part of that explicitly, you're allowed to continue with that as well, as long as it allows for mixed fuel. So that's kind of a little bit of an alignment there. And then state fire marshal amendments. If we're doing anything to improve the fire resistance, that can go in the code. And then alignment with national code models, so we don't want California to fall behind on all the other code sections, mechanical, plumbing, etc. So hopefully that clarifies. That was kind of a big deal, which turns out to be not a huge deal. We're just stay the course, lean in, as we say. There's also a specific LA fire response executive order that came in that says N2925, and it basically says, okay, hey, if you're having to rebuild because of the fire, you don't have to do the PVs, you don't have to do the batteries, you have to be PV ready, and you can keep plugging away with the 2022 energy code. There's also other get through the zoning and CEQA kinds of requirements. So very specific to that fire zone, trying to make that a little bit easier. And then the last of the state legislation that I wanted to touch on, because it has some relevancy, is about passive house. And because there's been, passive house is being recognized both for its alignment or superiority really with energy performance, but it also, as we are seeing in evidence, that it turns out to be a very fire resistant way to build as well. So those two things go together. I'll talk about it a little bit more, why that works, why that overlap is, and we'll have other experts in the room to be available for that as well. But it's a very low first step. Basically says, this legislation says, hey, Energy Commission, thou shalt do a report. Study this whole passive house thing, figure out how it overlaps with energy code standards, figure out that whole modeling thing, and give us a report by July of 2028. So put that on your radars. Passive house is kind of gaining a standing potentially in our energy. All right, so energy code and home hardening. So I just want to kind of highlight those areas where these two codes are playing very nicely, and a couple places where they diverge just a little. So there's kind of these main categories of air sealing, windows, outside air, attics and crawl spaces, roof-mounted PVs, and batteries. So those all are areas in which are going to have some importance. And everybody will get the slides. Just if you registered, sorry, I should have said that up front. We pack our slides knowing that you're going to get them to take home and share with your friends and family. All right, I'm going to spend a little extra time on those first three, but before I do, I just want to touch on that attics and crawl spaces is a super interesting evolving area of building science and building code, right? Because we used to make attics and we wanted a lot of air going through them, right? So we had them vented, and then we were realizing that embers were getting in through those vents because they were just, they were trying to keep squirrels out. So then we did like little smaller vents, more granular, and little itty bitty embers were still getting in. So now we're having this approach that is sealing it all together, but you still need to make sure that you have all the building science pieces, because you don't want the moisture in there. It's now semi-conditioned, and where do you put the insulation, etc. So same with crawl spaces. So just kind of a heads up that that's an evolving field, and make sure that you're getting the detailing right on those pieces. Roof-mounted PV panels, of course, there's a lot of overlap with, or it's dictated through, the energy code will tell you how much, but the fire code's going to tell you your aisles and clearances and those types of things. So those two need to go together well. Fire code trumps, right? And then battery is really interesting too, because of the flammability that there has been, but the chemistry is now getting better. So insulation and air sealing, just like insulation, air sealing, better installation of insulation, and better air tightness. All of these things improve your thermal performance and reduce your energy load, and they reduce the likelihood of fires, right? So here we'll see, like at the bottom, there's a sill plate that we're caulking. Actually, Mike has a fabulous video of a brand new home where you can see the air like coming through the exterior sill plate. I mean, it's crazy, some of those building practices that aren't they're just better. Just do those things, right? So air sealing around windows and around penetrations, etc. And then get a third party. Get somebody come in and make sure that it is being sealed correctly before you close up the walls. That's a great time to go and make sure that you're having a verification. And happily, there's a really great process, not only visually for QII, quality installation. Got some HERS raters in the room as well who can talk to us about that. But there's also, you can do blower door testing. And so in that way you close it, you have your home maybe under construction, almost done, and you close everything up, and you put this big red fan in the doorway, and then you put the thing to pressure, and then you see how quickly the pressure drops, right? How much leakage is there. You can test it going out, you can test it coming in, and it's verified by a HERS rater, which is going to be named Energy Code Compliance Rater in the new code cycle, so ECC, much better name, smarter. And then the air changes are at 50 Pascal, so we keep saying ACH 50, blah, 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 that's what that means. And then the level to achieve, typical is 6 to 10 air changes, so just kind of leaking out. Energy code assumes 5. If you're not getting verified, it figures, you probably did get into 5. But Title 24 gives you a credit if you are below 5. So if you can get to 3, then you get a better energy performance and, ta-da, less smoke, chance of fire coming into the home. And just as a by the way, passive house criteria, 0.6, ACH 50. Okay, and then a little bit about windows. Windows, there's a lot to think about. One, obviously, vinyl windows are going to melt, and then the glass just falls. So not a great building material for fire zones. The energy code has a thermal performance criteria. Again, this tends to align with fire resistance, but not always. In the case of fire resistant, fire rated windows, often they're steel. Steel has thermal bridging, and so it tends to it doesn't tend to be as thermally great, right? Heat could go through, but it is very resistant to fire. And so what the energy code says is usually you have to have a U factor of 0.4. Lower is better in U factors. So 0.4 is your max. But a lot of the fire rated windows are higher than that because they're steel. And so fire code trumps. So energy code says, yeah, okay, you can go a little higher. That's fine. In those fire severity zones. So, and then, and just keep your eyes out, because there's all kinds of things in the field, other materials, other ratings. Not everything has to have the full fire resistance, depends on what your goals are. We have some window experts in the room as well, from our friends at Hayward and maybe others as well, so we could definitely talk about that. and having a tempered glass in one of your panes. And I just learned from Chris, it's the interior pane that should be the tempered one. And then finally, just the energy code requires outside fresh air. As our homes get tighter and tighter, then if you're running your heating and running your cooling, you've got everything closed up. If it's a gorgeous day, just open your windows, turn off your system, that's great. But when everything is closed up, code requires that you have fresh air. Code also requires that if the air quality is bad outside, let's say smoky, that you need to be able to turn off that fresh air. So there needs to be a switch that the occupant can reach and needs to be communicated. It needs to say, fresh air system, leave on unless outside air is very poor. Right? It's hokey. It's a hokey approach. But I did see this particular company had these cute little stickers, which I like better than kind of the chunky plastic plaque. But some way to let people have control over their fresh air. All right, so sorry, I hope I didn't run too long.
No, you're great.
Am I good? Okay, so in conclusion, leverage the energy code to support your home hardening. Woo!
All right, so now we're going to switch on to Ryan Cullinan. He is the principal at Allen Construction and a certified passive home technician. So he is going to take us to the next level. Wow.
Hey everybody. Been at Allen here 9 years, 20 years in the residential, 20 plus years in the residential building industry. My focus is on high performance homes, so I think of that as kind of like beyond code homes, right? So passive house would be one version of that. But my focus is really around homes that promote occupant health, comfort, and support structure resiliency, right? So to natural disaster. I'm going to focus today a little bit more on fire hardening for existing structures, but a lot of this translates to. Can you guys hear me okay without the mic?
Yeah.
Okay. One less thing to carry. A lot of this will transfer to new homes as well. So in some ways you could look at this as like order of importance of what to attack, right? As an existing, if you're a homeowner of an existing home, starting with site protection and life safety is the most important. And then structure protection, looking at the actual materials that are on the home. I have a little bit more information for everybody about some extra precautions that you can take and maybe some technologies you weren't aware that existed or that support fire resiliency. And then I guess there's an argument that maybe insurance could be at the very top, right? So anyways, we'll go through this. All right, so there's some overlap here. Chris is going to go into more detail on defensible space, but I'll just go high level here, right? For existing homes, one of the single best things that that everyone can do is focus on defensible space, right, of the property, of the site there. So zone 0 is that 0 to 5 foot space around the house, and we really don't want any combustible materials in that area, right? If you picture 80-mile-per-hour winds with thousands of horizontal embers, blowing into the structure, settling down to the ground, that's where all the smoldering, right, is occurring there. So we're really looking at concrete, tile, rocks, and I believe succulents are still allowed, but we really don't want plantings otherwise, wood mulch. I know even my own house, right, I'm guilty of still needing to keep up with some of these best practices. And then, so zone 1 is going to focus more in that 5 to 30 foot area. We ideally don't want any trees within about 10 feet of the building, ideally further away, right? They should be pruned. You should have all dead limbs or any debris cleared away. And then the zone 2 is the 30 to 100 foot range, again, which is kind of reducing vegetation density. Chris will go into a little bit more detail on that with some graphics. The other reminder is, I know I see this all the time when I drive around or visit homes, that people have firewood stacked up right against their house, right? Or they have their outdoor barbecue with the portable propane tank, right up against the house. And so it's just a reminder that let's get combustibles away from the home, right? We never know when these disasters are gonna hit, and you're not gonna have time to go move a giant pile of wood, right? Same thing with under decks, right? Don't store combustible materials under your decks, right? That's just a best practice there. So moving kind of to safety, again, Chris is gonna go into a lot more detail from kind of a first responder standpoint, but best practices, things to be thinking about are egress, right? So in an existing home, especially these homes that were built a long time ago, you want to at least make sure that you have in every bedroom at least a door or a window large enough for an occupant to get out of, right? So that may be something to think about for architects or existing homeowners here to really look hard at what's there. For people who have two-story homes, it may sound extreme, but considering having some kind of emergency ladder system in case there's the inability to get down to the first level, right? So another thing to be thinking about. Outside, right, if you do have to get out quickly, do you have lighting and signage that's gonna, obviously lighting for your own safety, getting out in the middle of the night, signage for first responders and emergency personnel. And then emergency plans, right? No one wants to think about this, right? But the reality is when these events hit, it does get easier if you have kind of pre-gamed on what are your routes, not just off the property, but where are you going, right? Where, is there, especially in Santa Barbara, other areas on the Central Coast, there's not a lot of options, right? We're kind of an island, mountains on one side, ocean on the other. And so really just thinking and even practicing about how you're gonna get to safety and what you're gonna bring with you, where your things are stored, right? Okay, so next section, moving over to structure protection. We like to say, think like an emperor, right? That's kind of the best way to be thinking about best building practices on the structure itself. So Andy touched on it. Vents and eaves, in a lot of ways, are most vulnerable places on the home, right? Especially existing homes. A lot of new homes now are often being designed without venting, right? Taking the building envelope all the way up to the roof itself, the underside of the roof, and either doing a slab on grade or having a conditioned crawl space area. So that would be the best thing you could do, would be to eliminate all venting completely. And there's a lot of different strategies for that for existing homes. And like Andy said, you have to be careful that you get your insulation and your vapor barrier and your air barrier in the right place to avoid moisture issues or condensation there. Now, if eliminating venting is outside of budget or outside of reality, there are a lot of options for installing fire-rated vents or mesh screens, right? On your existing crawl space vents, your attic vents, your eave vents. So moving on to decks and fencing, ideally, again, you want to avoid combustible materials that are touching the house, right? That's pretty hard to do with decking in general. Easier to do with fencing, but again, I think a lot of, we see this a lot, right? Where you have wood fencing coming right into the fence structure itself. So you really want to think about maybe going to some kind of a metal type of fence that you can grow, plantings that are well hydrated, right? This is a photo here of a project where we're closing off a elevated deck, right? So best practices for deck, you can do, this is a hardy plant material, but you can use also like an ember resistant fire mesh if you need to as well. But we're really just trying to limit the ability for embers to be blowing in and igniting below as best as possible. When you're building new decks, you can consider having metal joists, right, instead of wood joists. And if you are using wood joists, we always recommend using a foil-backed joist tape on top of all the joists before the decking goes down. And then there's a lot of Class A rated decking, that different decking types that you can use. Maybe we can go into that a little bit more during the question and answer session. Okay, so roofs. Aside from upgrading your materials to a Class A rated roof, a best practice is certainly keeping clean gutters and considering putting gutter guards on there to just avoid having debris build up, right? Again, we're just, think like an ember. That stuff blows in, you got all these dry leaf and plant debris in there. It's not gonna be helpful. So some different types that we're looking at, metal, tile or concrete, slate, fiberglass asphalt shingles, right, are gonna be the most cost effective. And then there are some synthetic shake options now that are Class A for, if you're trying to historically match things in this area. There's a lot of shake style roofs, Da Vinci, Cedar, a couple different brands that offer that. And then we also want to make sure we're getting spark arresters on chimneys, not just for sparks coming out, but for sparks coming in as well, if that makes sense. Doors and windows, Andy talked about that a little bit. We do want at least dual pane with one layer of tempered glass, again, ideally on the inside there. Non-combustible frames, Andy talked about that as well, right? So steel, aluminum clad, fiberglass in some cases, but really just looking at materials that are gonna resist heat there. And again, these are not inexpensive things to do on an existing home, right? So maybe let's think about this, think about this from a new home perspective, right? That we wanna ensure, certainly in a new home, we're paying attention to this. And then ceiling gaps, like Andy talked about, right? Where, again, the less air intrusion that comes in, the more fire resistant in general. Siding, trim, fascia, same thing, right? So considering going to non-combustible, common materials would include stucco, fiber cement, metal, stone or brick veneer. Now, look, I do want to acknowledge at the same time, these materials that are the most fire resistant for structures are also almost always the heaviest embodying carbon materials, right? Meaning that the mining, the manufacturing, and the transportation for those materials have way more carbon than a plant-based material, which is something we should be paying attention to as well. So I did put on here that there are some Class A wood products, some plant-based products that you can consider. And then you are allowed to use wood on your buildings in new homes if you're putting a fire control beneath it, right? So that could be drywall, that could be dense glass. Again, not best practice for resiliency in general. We want to be thinking about keeping something non-combustible as best as possible. All right, so supplementary systems and protection. I'm going to try to fly through this here. Wildfire sprinkler systems, this is something we're starting to do a lot more of for people who are in these WUI or super extreme fire areas. They're not able to get insurance. And some of the things that they're having to decide around is, do we self-insure or do we make some additional adjustments to the home that allow us to meet some minimum insurance requirements? So this is one example of a project that has eave sprayers with a Class A foam system. It is app controlled. It's tied into a weather station that tells the programming when a fire is close by so that it can automatically go off if you're not around or don't have access to it. You don't want that foam to go in the building if there's not a fire. There is some chemical issues with, cleaning that, and so it's not a perfect solution. But I think a lot of homeowners, especially in more remote areas, are considering these systems. There's another local company that's experimenting with acoustic fire suppression systems. So the idea is it's an infrasound wave. It's not something that's audible to human ear, but the sound wave eliminates the oxygen in the air, suppressing the flames. And so you can see they're kind of experimenting with having kind of these gutter systems. It's powered by battery, it's app controlled as well, that push the sound waves down towards embers and ignition down below, right? So we may be seeing more about this in the next few months here. This is a little bit more extreme and certainly not for everyone's budget, but we have done some safety bunkers before, storage vaults. So this was kind of an example of something that we've done in Montecito, which is similar to like a wine cave or an art cave or something like that. But for someone who's very remote and may not have the option to be able to get out quickly, you can consider something as extreme as this as well. All right, so this is a picture from that probably everyone's seen from the Altadena area from the Eaton fire. I believe this is a certified passive home, and just an example that homes can survive these extreme fires. They can, right? And some other things, you can see a lot of the things on this building that we've talked to that it does have, right? It looks like it has a primary stucco exterior, probably a fire-rated, wood face on the front there, concrete, fencing instead of wood fencing, and I mean, for this car and this other home to burn that close to it, it really says a lot about, no venting at all on the home there, what's possible, right? And it does kind of bring up a question about what our, I heard this table talking about what is our responsibility as a neighbor or as a community member, right, to protect the neighborhood by keeping your own home safe. Okay, wrap this up. Andy talked about fire shutters, intumescent paint coatings are some other additional things you could do. Occupant ventilation systems, right, as we're stuck in these 3-4 week smoke conditions, right, we want to have filtered fresh air coming in, backup power, right, thinking about that, what we might need there. Insurance, just real quickly here. Keeping up with, if you do improvements or renovations, making sure that you're updating your insurance to cover the full value of your home with improvements now. Keeping an eye on building codes, so if the building codes might be, requiring, more expensive code-related new features when your home's rebuilt, and so really your insurance should be valued at what it costs to do your new home, right? Not what your home value is now. Monitor changing regulations is another best practice there. Just because you're not in a WUI area right now, you might be in a few months, so keep an eye on that, right? And then California Fair Plan, that is, at least last I checked, there is coverage up to $3 million for single-family homes for those who can't get insurance privately. A few takeaways: if you know there's things on your property that can be changed, take the steps or talk to a professional about how you can be prepared and make those changes. Inevitability of fire and wind. We know we're going to get more of these events. Let's be prepared. No fire amnesia. Let's avoid that. And fire-ready homes equals resilient communities, right? We all kind of have to pitch in to create the resilient community.
Awesome.
More information on the site. Sorry.
To our next level, and just so everyone knows, again, these slides will be available to all of you because there's so much great information on there. And so Chris Olmstead is a fire captain with the County of Santa Barbara Fire Department and has a 30 years of experience, and he's going to take us to this next level of what's like on the ground.
Hello there. Let me know if you guys can't hear me. Then I get mic, but hopefully you guys can hear me. If I can figure this out. triggers would break when I come up. Firefighters are known for breaking things, so, you know.
Did it go off? Here we go.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. It was a team effort. Thanks a village.
So, again, I'm here to talk a little bit about how being and designing and having your homeowners be more wildfire resilient in their design, it actually benefits and helps us protect and fight these wildfires. A little introduction of myself. I'm a fire captain with Santa Barbara County Fire Department. I've been on the department coming on 28 years, starting as a firefighter paramedic, coming all the way up into a role as captain, where I currently manage and supervise our plan review section for building and planning purposes, where we do plan reviews. I've been on several wildland fires throughout my career. One of the things in regards to, and I think everyone's seen it, is, I mean, obviously we've always had fires in Southern California and throughout the states inside our wildland area, but they have tended to be more and more prevalent, and then the effects of how they, you know, the impact of devastation has been increasing for various reasons, you know, drought, but also too, as we grow as a society, we are encroaching more and more inside the wildland urban area. And so we start to see the impact that we have with the number of homes that we got burning and stuff like that. We'll talk a little bit about, like, you know, fire behavior structure triage and what we can do for those things. One of the key factors in large firefighter growth, fire growth, and the devastation that comes from that is really wind-driven fires. And throughout mainly Southern California, but most local areas have their wind events. You know, we've all heard of down south, the Santa Ana winds. Locally, we have what we call our sundowner winds, and that's where we get a big, strong push down from the mountains due to pressure gradients with inside the ocean and the valley area. And we have strong wind forces coming down, forcing dry, hot air onto our communities. And everyone from this area has heard of the Painted Cave Fire, which was, you know, really devastating in regards to structure loss in Santa Barbara County. Looking at responding to emergency calls, what do we list as emergency responders, and what do we put as our priorities in how we deal with these types of emergencies? And obviously, first and foremost, we look at life safety, making sure that people are out and that our firefighters come back home safely. Then we start looking at, okay, now we want to stabilize the incidents, put the fire out, or if we can't, direct it into areas that are less impactful. And this also, you know, when we talk about like property conservation, how can we preserve and protect structures, but also critical infrastructures, you know, power lines. I mean, we sit and do our firefighting tactics based on some of the power grids in the lake in regards to water, power, and these other, you know, cultural significant areas. You know, I've gone out and wrapped cabins and trees because they're historical things and they mean things to our community. So that's also a thing. And then we also think about the environmental impacts that these fires have and how can we, you know, present that. So what do we face as we fight these fires and we go out? This is from the recent LA fires. Obviously high heat, you know, exhaustion from being out on these lines for so long. You know, we're talking about high temperature, not only from the flames, but also from, these typically happen during, strong temperature, low humidity, I've been out, when the Wildfire fire happened several years ago, I was really, our crews, because of the impact it was having, 72 hours on the fire line. And so it has these huge impacts and stuff, and then obviously the delay in evacuations, the narrow roads and stuff. And it brings it into the effects of the smoke. We're starting to see a lot more impact in regards to, in the past it was really, fire driven on what we really talked about, but really the smoke has a huge impact on us. And when we start looking at like the toxicity associated with the smoke, not only for us as firefighters, but also for the civilian population that are out there in regards to like, poor air quality and the effects of like asthma and stuff. And when you look at like the recent LA fires that occurred, and there was actually a significant loss of life that was underreported in regards to the effects of the fire, just due to the effects of exposures of people being evacuated, and also too, like the effects of people, elderly or respiratory compromise, where there was a significant number of people that died directly because of smoke exposure during these fires. And so really we're starting to get into, early, stay aware and early evacuation is key to these things. So, and part of that is we have in the fire department our triage criteria, not too much different than triaging a sick person. We also have that associated with how we deal with structures, and really this deals with what the homeowner has done to prepare that gives us the ability to best, protect the most number of structures. So we're starting to go as really like one of the things is defense, defensible, non-defensible is really what we're looking at. Can we defend this, or is it so, dangerous that we can't? And we're really starting to go at, okay, I can come here, I have my safety zones, because we're really looking at if I'm going to send people into, or my crew and stuff, I need to have some understanding that they're going to be protected. Again, we have a saying, we risk a lot to save a lot, risk very little to save very little. So it really has to do with the preparation and how we do that. So, hey, I can come on a house, maybe it's not perfect, but you can tell that they've done some stuff. They have some non-combustible requirements. They've maybe not done completely, but they've done some defensible space. So maybe like I have some time, I can move that wood pile that you have, because it's going to take me like, with my crew, it's going to take me like 5 minutes. And I can start preparing in a timely manner. Because you got to remember, we're looking at like multiple houses that we have to protect. And we're in a position where the fire is like away from us and it's coming down to us. So it's a dangerous situation for us. So then we got our standalone, where it's like you look at that and you go, hey, they've done everything perfect. Their spacing in regard to their defensible space is good. There's very little effect, and I might just do like an occasional drive-by to make sure that it's still holding up. But these are like the things that are like, oh, we like. And then there's the non-dispensable. This is like, you go into the situation where everything's overgrown. You can tell that there's no effort's been made. And I have to ask myself, why am I going to risk my crew and myself when the property owner has done little to do that? And not only that, it's like I said, it takes like, years of time within, a 15-minute, 20-minute window now, you know, it's like I just can't do it. So when we then look at like, okay, what are our tactics in regards to that? And this starts getting into like, hey, I could do, just one last thing, is when we get into the non-defensible, the one thing, again, it goes back to protecting life. This is something where we might just drive by, just to make sure that no one's there, you know, and we might, if they are, we might either tell them or help them leave, or even sometimes put them in the rig and leave, you know. This is my crew fighting the Woolsey fire. And then so we got like, okay, we're going to, you know, do our different tactics on how we put out and address the fire front as it's coming up and looking at. And one of the things might just be like a tactical patrol when you start to look at the houses going that are defensible is, hey, I'm gonna drive around and just make sure that nothing hasn't come up or the embers haven't, you know, done something that was unexpected. Again, we get into our evacuations, moving forward into that, and things we can do and what goes wrong with that, and especially when people hold off. And it's really a hard decision for someone to make to leave their property with not knowing. And it's understandable, but really you've got to concentrate on all the ill effects that it does have, blocking up roads. I mean, this is during the fires in 25 where there were so many cars blocking the road because the fire came so fast that people ran, where they actually used a bulldozer to just plow through the cars and push it to the side. And so you don't want to be, you know, stuck on the side of the road as the fire front is coming, and now you're worried about even, you know, surviving. So remember, and everyone knows, should memorize and go to the county OES website and readysbc.org, and you can sign up and you can receive notifications of when we have these incidences and stuff. And really starting to keep like our fire clearance and driveways. This starts going into, again, what we've been talking about in a fire safe house versus, you know, what isn't good, and things we can do with inside our you know, actions to keep our house survivable. Our defensible space zone in Santa Barbara County, we do enforce Zone 0 for our new construction, and this is a key factor of survivability. And then also too, what's not really talked about much, but it is a requirement, is what we call our Zone 3 and really our access zone, and making sure that as you're evacuating, the fire is coming up, you're not getting impacted by the fire. Again, just showing some of the things that you can do as a home, that you still have landscaping, you can still have stuff, but making it safe. This is a video showing by CAL FIRE, showing the difference between no Zone 0 and Zone 0 and keeping our plants behind. And one of the things going is like, these are potted plants and stuff that remember, I just have this potted plant in front of my house or right up against my window or something like that. That plastic and those pots, because you could be evacuated for multiple days with no watering, low humidity, high winds, where they're just drying out that plant that it would normally be good. And you just see the difference of that, how that has an effect on the one that's not, that has combustible siding, and then the wood mulch and all that. And then also too, the wood fence coming up into the fence is a key factor in why several houses burn during these large events. Here I am on one of the fires, looking down, and it really starts going into how you can prepare and we can work together so that we can do what we can and make our efforts more efficient. We have these general orders. We call them our 10s and 18s, which are your 10 fire orders and then your 18 washout situations that were embedded into us from an early age and on things we can do order-wise and protecting ourselves. But one of the key and last orders, what we talk about is fight fire aggressively, having provided for safety first. And that's one of the key aspects of what we try to do in that. And I was a little fast, but hopefully you got something out of it.
Sorry for the little technical.
Mike
Horgan up here, he is a passive house builder. He's going to talk about what we do when we need to rebuild. So good luck with this one.
How's it? Which button is the advance?
I think it should be the top ones. Yeah, just move that forward. There you go.
It was interesting to hear Chris just talk about something small like potted plants outside your house and what's going to burn and what's not going to burn. And I was thinking, you know, what pot's not going to burn is a clay pot, and also what kind of home is not going to burn is a natural clay adobe home, which is not actually in the International Code Council yet, but should be. We are trying to permit an adobe home in Altadena right now. We'll see if it works. So this always reminds me of the Mike Tyson quote. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. You prep for these things and you think you got it under control, and you stand in front of 50 people and like, oh shit, I forgot what I was gonna say. Anyway, I'm gonna switch the topic a little bit and probably the mood. I've been doing these workshops with Andy and with Michelle for like 5 or 6 years now. So we usually teach about energy code and materials, and I think most of us in this room have heard those workshops about codes and materials. But there's a side to things that also happens in construction that we tend to not pay a lot of attention to, which is probably also our greatest fault. So, who are architects in this room? Awesome. And who are like builders and tradespeople? A few builders and tradespeople, and then a bunch of vendors. Down the back. So, Andy's got a degree from MIT, and I can't, my brain doesn't work like her, so I have to use notes when I speak. So, I'll try to give a little bit of humor as we talk about like a really serious subject, and that subject is going to be why all of us should be going to therapy on a regular basis. So my name is Mike Horgan. I have a design build, residential custom design build company in San Luis Obispo. I've been doing it for 23 years now in business, although 6, 7 years on the Central Coast now. So we are passive house design builders. We have been. I did the first one in like 2009, 2010 on the East Coast, which is a totally different assembly system than here on the West Coast. It's actually a lot easier to do here, and more people should be doing it. I think, as the other guys were saying, it is moving that direction. I'm going to talk about the human side of all of this, which I think most people in the construction industry screw up the most. And I've had 4 quick conversations just this morning before this presentation started. None of them were related to materials or energy codes. All of them were related to human beings. So I'm going to try to talk a bit about that. I put this together with our team. I don't want to take credit for it. I just happen to be the face that's not afraid to speak in public, and I happen to know Andy, who invites me to these things. So, but I did this with Caroline Dunn, who Ryan's crew knows really well, and with Zach Pasma, who, if you're from SLO, you probably know Zach as well. These are 2 really fantastic human beings, and we are actively involved in the Altadena rebuild, even though we're based in San Luis Obispo. We didn't make that choice, it kind of came to us, and we found ourselves unable to say no. So That's our agenda for this. I'm gonna try to keep it under the time limit. I think it's a really important topic because we beat the other ones into the ground over many, many years, and this one doesn't get touched on a lot. So all of the photos in this slide are mine, and the show are all mine. So it's from my walking around Altadena over the last 8 months, since January, right after the fires happened. So I'm sorry I'm blocking you guys, but so we're going to talk about PTSD and trauma and working with people who are in a situation of PTSD or who are victims of trauma, survivors of trauma. What is PTSD? It's kind of a brain condition, and it happens after one event. So it's different than chronic PTSD, which chronic PTSD is what most of us end up in therapy for things that happened to us when we were 3 or 4 years old and we don't deal with till we're 50. But PTSD is what arises from one single traumatic event that then causes a rearranging of the brain. Triggers heightened emotional responses. It really disrupts the brain's ability to make logical decisions. I didn't say that. I have a background in economics and linguistics, actually, before I came into construction. I was in construction first, then went back and did those things, and then went back to construction, and thought I would never have to remember anything I read in 150 grand worth of college education. I tried hard to forget it, and then it really all comes back to how human brains work, and that's like what we deal with every day. Banging nails is actually kind of that's the easy part. The human part's really hard. So, when you're in a situation of PTSD and high trauma and high stress, your decision-making ability has gone out the window. We do have. Our brain usually uses a rational choice theory when we make decisions, and there are processes that we follow where if you're an architect or a builder, you guys probably have clients who research you for 3-4 years before they finally make the call and say, hey, would you think about working with us? So there's a process of analyzing and researching and making a rational decision. That the term actually comes from economics, where we would weigh the costs of something versus the benefits of something, but it also applies to psychology. After a fire event, nobody has rational choice working because nobody planned for it, and they woke up the next morning or never went home and now find themselves in a situation of how do we undertake the single most expensive and important event we're going to undertake in our lives. They're really susceptible in those moments. So, we didn't come up with these strategies before we went into this. It was serendipity that brought us into helping down there, and we didn't know what we were getting into. I actually took 2 trips down myself just to be boots on the ground and really see what was going on. And to be honest, we were saying no at first. We weren't going to get involved. As I was talking with these guys earlier, there are a lot of good people. Mr. Rogers said look for the helpers. There's also a lot of jerks that come out of the woodwork in these situations and really try to take advantage of people whose rational choice theory is not working in their brains, and the bad guys know about that as well. So we didn't come up with these strategies beforehand. We came up with them on the fly, like winging it. We jumped off the cliff and learned how to fly on the way down. And we've decided that these 5 things, Caroline, Zach, and myself decided that these 5 strategies work for us. So I'm just going to talk about that, and hopefully, as you guys all work with people, maybe it'll work for you. And yeah. So empowering through communication, in linguistics, communication also means non-communication. We communicate a lot more, not more, but almost as much by what we don't say and what we don't do, by what we do say and what we present to people. So we took this strategy of being listeners first, and I can't really stress how stressful it was. If you're architects, it's it's really hard to want to listen first, not be heard first. But it was really clear that we were about to become basically the prefrontal cortex for all the people that we were working for. That's the part of your brain that controls the rational choice theory, and that's the part that's impaired when you're in a situation of PTSD or high stress. So we spent a lot of time. I was telling Ryan, it was probably a full-time job for me, outside of our jobs, which are already full-time jobs at 60 hours a week, just listening, just literally sitting in people's hotels or meeting at cafes all around Los Angeles, because most of the people didn't have homes or didn't even have a home to rent, and honestly just listening. No decision making, no pressure, literally just holding hands, crying, and listening. We're a pretty honest crew, I think, from the beginning. I think Andy would vouch for me on that one. We're probably too much to a fault even, but I think it's a good way to go through life. People are, when they're in a situation of PTSD, though the rational choice making has maybe gone out the window for a minute, they're hyper vigilant about the people that are, well, it's one or the other. They're either not vigilant at all or they're hyper vigilant about what's being said to them. So we just took a stance that we would be 100% honest, and that included playing the role of dream smasher quite often. I was telling Ryan that I had a woman walk up to me and say she got $400,000 from the insurance company, and she had a 2-bedroom, 2-bath home, lived with her 2 daughters, and what could she do for $400,000? And this was in a setting like this with a big crowd around. And I had to say to her, we can't build an unfinished garage for $400,000 in California right now. So, but I would rather say that to her than lie to her and give her false hope, which we talked about false hope too. We realized that we were empowering the people we were working with. They were very scared and very intimidated at first, and our job wasn't to be, Caroline is a licensed architect, I'm not. Zach's a designer, not licensed, but working with, so I don't want to use architect and offend anybody who's licensed, but Caroline is. So we realized that as we were designing these homes or starting to talk about design, we were actually giving the people the power, their own power back to trust themselves and begin to trust their decision-making process again, which had been disabled for, at that point, 3 or 4 months. So, people can see if you're not authentic, and it's just a little word in there, but authenticity goes a long way. Integrity is what you do behind closed doors when nobody can see what you're doing. So, and nobody knows that you've done it, but high integrity and high authenticity were important. And then once we'd gotten through those phases and been working with the people for a little while, then we felt that we had finally earned the right to be heard, and they began to ask us questions and trust that we were also going to be giving them the best options for going forward. But we really worked really hard. It's not like they walked in our front doors after researching us for years and said, tell us what you think we should do. We spent a lot of time earning that right to be heard. These are things that probably apply like in normal processes, but it's heightened 100x when you're in these situations. So people are operating in a world of chaos, so we told ourselves that we are going to be the structure bringers to this process. So we set very clear expectations. We promised 100% transparency, and we provided that, and that includes like in question and answers, but also in financial matters, which ultimately almost everything's going to come down to dollars. So very clear expectations, clear structure, and 100% honesty and transparency about everything, which includes when we didn't know things. So I had a professor in grad school who said to us one time, like, what are the 3 most important words you can say to students? And everyone was like, I love you. And finally went around the room and someone was like, I don't know. And he was like, that's it. I don't know. So we tell people what we don't know as well. So. Clarity is kindness is a phrase we use in our group and our team a lot. So we set up these phases, and this is after doing months of research within a fire zone, because in a recovery area, nobody really knows what's happening. The rules and regulations are changed. Reddit is going crazy. There's discords, and everybody's got their idea of what's happening, and none of them are correct. There's a little bit of correctness to everything. So it took a lot of time for us to research and find out what the exact truth was. And being a kind human goes a long way. We were able to get meetings with building officials that I think we probably wouldn't have gotten, and get really, really clear information. So those are the 5 phases we've set up, and we are not deviating from them at all. We use the phrase "with you" a lot. Anybody ever play rugby here? Shocker. What's that? Yeah, it's not New England. There's a phrase in rugby called "with you." I know it's a sports ball thing, and I don't really play much sports anymore, but in that sport, as you're advancing the ball, you're actually in front of all your teammates, so you can't see the support that's behind you. Like, you actually can't, you're looking forward. So your teammates are just screaming, "with you, with you, with you." And you just have to trust that that voice behind you is one of your teammates. So as you're about to get smashed in the face, you just pop the ball up in the air. And you've heard that voice "with you" in the back of your head, so you know that your support is right there. So we've been using that phrase a lot throughout this process. It's worked really well. Last slide, so I think we're gonna make it. In a normal design process, in a construction process, I tell people there's 250,000 decisions that they have to make from the beginning of the process to the end of construction. I don't know if it's 250,000, but sometimes it feels like it, if not more. And decision fatigue can come into decision-making processes in the best of times with people who have lots of money and fancy second and third homes to live in, or sitting in an office somewhere making decisions, and they're just like, "We're over it," and they're going to lunch. But in a situation where people's decision-making ability is already impaired, and their decisions are, where are we going to find a new hotel because we have to be out of this one in 2 weeks and we don't have anywhere else to go? Where are we going to find a second pair of shoes? We lost all our shoes. Almost every family we're working with lost all of their clothes and had to start from scratch. So we have been taking the strategy of only presenting 3 choices, which is a common practice in architecture and design, where you present 3 options and 2 of them are really good and one's not so good, but it might make one of the other ones look really good. We're eliminating that process altogether, and we spend a lot of time in-house making sure we come up with 3 very good, very easy decidable decisions for the clients, so that we're putting them in a no-fail position. So any one of the options is going to be a good option. We're not trying to prove that one is better than the other. We do that in-house first. So we don't do any of the bad or blind design. That's what we call it. We throw this 3rd option out that's kind of crappy, makes us look like heroes on the other ones. We've eliminated that completely. We've actually talked about removing our egos completely from the whole process. So setting very clear expectations. Their anxiety is already really heightened. They've basically been disappointed by the world, and now they're asking us to help them. They're also giving us, not a lot of money, but they're giving us money to help them. We do not want to let them down. We don't want any more disappointment in their lives. So it's a big undertaking. I mean, we were talking earlier that some people look around and just go, it's too much. It's a lot. So being listeners first really starts to help that empowerment process. Full transparency, that's like through the design, through the materials, especially through financial decisions and through scheduling. Scheduling is huge in this process because these people are actually on real timelines. Most of them have insurance money, but only for a certain amount of time to cover a rental or a home. It's not like they have 4 or 5 years to design a house and then start construction. Real important, the last thing that we decided on is we formatted our whole system so that every one of our clients has one point of contact with a backup contact on our team. So our communication with clients is strictly scheduled. It comes once a week, only once a week, and it comes in a very structured, formatted email, and it has a formatted system for them to reply with questions and answers. So we've found that when they're operating in chaos Monday through Thursday, they actually really enjoy getting these Friday communications from us because they know that there's going to be 4 things they have to think about, and that's it. And all of the decisions that have to be made through designing this new home that they're going to have are in that 4-point email, and we never miss it. I miss a lot of stuff normally. We don't miss this stuff. We don't deviate from this process at all. There you go. That's about it.
So this is an amazing panel from sort of like deep knowledge of the details of our state code and how we build to incredible empathy about actually how we help real humans do this. So I've been making sure our speakers move along because I want to make sure that you guys have time to ask them some questions. So that's where we are right now. So let's start, and if you could, keep them tight so we can have them answer it. And if you have somebody who you particularly want to answer it, let us know, or if you want it for everybody to answer. So anybody want to start off with questions here? Yeah, right here.
We heard that attics and crawl spaces ideally are sealed. If they're not sealed, what's the best practice? I mean, there's a code requirement for 1/8" openings on vents. Are there superior vents? What's the best practice if you're venting?
Well, I think it goes to dependent on the situation. There's obviously, if you're in a situation where you want more protection, obviously the engineered stuff can do that. So you got to look at where am I in regards to my defensible space, where's my spacing, where am I in my stagnant area for ember tab, and then look at what option is best in that regards, because it does make little differences, and maybe these guys that actually install them more can, portray more on them actually installing them and use it. I don't think you can take a one ad approach to it.
Ryan or Mike, want to add anything to that?
I mean, I think every situation is different. That question can be answered by how are you designing the roof? What's the roof made out of? What's the underside of the roof made out of? What material are you insulating with? What material do you want to insulate with? What's the slope of the roof?
Decision points there, Mike.
Every decision would have another repercussion.
And I think something onto that, are you looking at pre-existing versus new build? Are you looking at certain budget lines that you're saying, hey, I want to get the biggest bang for my buck? Because they all have a role in that too. And so those things are important too, is, how much money can I spend? Do I want to do a lot, so do I want to, spend more on this versus that?
Maybe I'm not being clear. I am going to vent the attic. What are my options? There's a screen, obviously. Is there something that automatically closes? Is there intumescent? What are the options?
Great question. And the good news is that the market is really responding. And I would talk to supply houses about the kinds of products that are available. I'm seeing our friends over here. They have some that are open, and then they actually respond to heat and either kind of like seal themselves shut, and after the fire you have to actually replace them, or they have other ones that have different kinds of mechanisms. But there are devices now that are much more very small ember resistant.
I was speaking with one of my suppliers yesterday, Denise. She sells roofing supplies at Beacon in Oxnard. One of the questions that she said, I wish I could be there. But they're having an issue with venting of the attics. And the issue is that a lot of these vents, they've gone from $18 a piece to $100, $150, and none of them are registered or certified. And the contractors are having a hard time telling the homeowner, buy this $300 vent, because people are just throwing stuff out there and none of them being tested or certified So she's having a really hard time bringing in product that is possibly good or hasn't been tested. And then, you know, the liability goes into the contractor because he's the one that installed it.
Yeah,
And so, that's a big issue.
yeah. Back here, and then to you, yeah.
And so the state fire marshal's office has on their website, they have a listing of all the approved products that are fire safe or wildfire interface. And that includes venting, top out on plumbing, exterior materials, deck construction materials. It's very comprehensive.
And what's that site again?
State fire marshal's office.
State Fire Marshals, okay.
But I have to say, you know, the state tries, they're trying to keep it updated. It may not have the most current information in it, but it's a pretty good resource. And you'll find attic vents, crawl space vents, decking materials, exterior sidings.
I would just add
Yeah,
to this
go ahead, yeah.
topic for Dennis and other architects that when we're doing these retrofits, to put fire rated, crawl space vents or attic vents, one of the issues that we commonly come against is that those don't have the same airflow rating as the other ones. And so then you have this need to create additional venting, which is kind of defeating the purpose in some ways. And so it's still a better option, but that's just a heads up that oftentimes in order to still meet the code requirement, the code ventilation requirement, we then have to add even more vents that are fire rated.
Okay, so I have it here, and then to you, John. Yeah.
Hi, I'm one of the fire inspectors, this is Louise Lowry Davis Center, and I've met you a while ago. I kind of have an energy code and fire code question, specifically about trees, because one thing you'll know about our community, we want to be a tree community. But we also have the issue of 10 feet from structures, but our downtown has loads of trees all along the parkway, sidewalks, and we want trees, but we don't want them 10 feet building. But that's the only place we have put trees. So it's also an energy thing, like trees create cooler space. So we're kind of in a, well, what do we do with these trees? How are we gonna keep them available throughout our city and also meet that 10-foot setback from canopies? So I don't know if you guys have any understanding on it, any recommendations, but basically we're on like, we want to keep the shade, we want to keep the trees, but we also want to meet this new requirement that's hit our city in a large way.
Thank you for bringing that. That's the tension that I've been really interested about too, because you know, how do you manage flooding and when you have hardscapes, and how do you have, when we have more extreme heat, how do we do that with hardscapes? So,
Well,
guys, yeah.
this is the only place where the fire code conflicts with other codes. And that's always one of the issues, is there's always these conflicts of, you know, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to be fire safe, but then I have these other energy, I have my ventilation issues, and so this is not a unique situation, and it really starts to get into, when we look at, from my point of view, I take it then on an individual case basis is, okay, I got this tree here, I can then have a landscape plan that then allows me to say, okay, I'm going to maintain this tree and keep other vegetation away that helps prevent that ladder fuel. So then I might go, hey, instead of having, you know, other vegetation, I'm going to increase, you know, so that if something does catch, it's not going to go. Or I'm going to use a certain type of tree because it's more fire smart in that regard. And so it's really on a case by case, and you have to ask for those exceptions of saying, hey, how can we do this, and what compromises can we live with?
Chris, could I go further? Like your video showed the difference of, you had 3 big issues. You had the wood chips, you had the fence, and then you had the plantings. You know, if you take out the wood chips, you have rocks there and no fence, but you have the green, that's a compromise that maybe, I'm not asking my question. So you're like balancing these needs.
And this is something, I just had a recent project up in the Panic Cave area where the defensible space requirement was really, because they had to remove some habitat sensitive materials, and their requirements were like, hey, I have to recoup this by 60%, and my lot size is starting to go. So it's like, well, me as the fire official say, well, you can't build on that, and now you can't do anything with that parcel. And so there is a compromise that has to go on, and it really is a one-on-one communication that you have to have with the code official on that. And it's not a one and done situation that you can apply to everything, because there are compromises that can take place, and there was ways for us to then take that parcel and make it livable.
That's what I'm here.
I would also recommend this is my thing. I'm on a board called Rescape California, and they do a fire landscaping process for public sector and commercial things, and I can turn you on to that. They have some trainings on how to do that and some of those things, and I think they've been working with fire officials too to like figure out how that balances out. So that's awesome. John, you have a question?
I just want to start by saying I think the slides and presentation were phenomenal. I really appreciated how different they were to kind of provide a full picture. I'm going to ask a question to the panelists that's not on the panel. Sorry. For new construction or for homeowners who are trying to make their properties and existing homes safer, how close are we in reality to the insurance market having pricing such that there's a meaningful reward to get insurance or to have lower insurance because you spent your sweat equity or out-of-pocket expenses to do some of these things? And I think a lot of these things honestly are no and low cost. I think there's a range, and I'm just curious. Like, I think for those of us who've been in the climate space for 20 or 30 years, we've been waiting for this to happen, and it seems like the insurance industry swung the pendulum 180 degrees, and everyone was like, "We're not doing business in California." Like, where's the market pricing here? Is it? So this is to the insurance specialist on the panel.
Yes, Mike.
I love corporations. I don't know, it's something we're talking to a lot of our clients with, but one thing that you said that just struck me right there was the no to low cost thing. You can design a 1,500 square foot house that's $750,000, $800,000. You can make that same that same 1,500 square foot house a $3 million house, just with a couple of swipes of a pen or a pencil. So the cost pendulum is, it's all over the map. It doesn't pertain to just one size of a thing or one particular location of a thing. So I don't know.
I wonder if I could take this to the next level, this question. And it was from a couple of the things in the very beginning where we talked about the difference between what an individual does and what a community can do. And I'm curious, how does that play into this question of insurance and like getting the community to be more resilient around wildfire? Does that help this question at all?
I think so.
Yeah.
One of the things we've been seeing is you're right. The insurance factor is huge, and especially when you lose your insurance, and then it's like, hey, I can't even afford insurance. And we've done certain things, and you can't on a community basis. One of the big pushes firewise communities, where you collectively come in and you get your community certified through the firewise things. Insurance companies are starting to recognize that. One of the things I've done that I've seen on our department is, it doesn't always work, but sometimes it does, where we get insurance questionnaires and looking at, okay, what's our response time? How close are they to a public water or hydrant system? What's their flow? What's the width of the roads? And we can provide certain questions that then helps the insurance company reduce their price. But ultimately, it comes down most likely to legislation in regards to what the legislators want to do to help homeowners with insurance companies. Until you know, you get into these things, you know, that's all you can do really is work on your own home in regards to like resilience and fire hardening and your physical space and then your fire-wise communities, but other than that, you're limited.
Good, up here in the front.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Nate. I'm new hire with the County of Santa Barbara. There's Firewise, LEED, Passive House, Earthships, like there's all these different things. It's kind of a two-parter. On this design, building, and protection side, are you looking at them as specific strategies with pros, cons, maybe one's better than the other? Or is it kind of just a large pool of strategies with fun trademark names? And how do architects, builders, and fire marshals who are responding to these things decide which of those strategies are best, but particularly homeowners? How is that decision made?
It's a great question, because there are layers to it. So we've recently had a couple, and they're doing a bed and breakfast, and so they're like, yeah, what can we do to show our commitment to sustainability? And so it does take that kind of analysis. Like, okay, what's your scope of work? What are you trying to do? Is LEED applicable? There's another one about health and wellness. Well, there's a living building challenge. So those kind of big picture or different niches in some ways. I would say that the energy code and passive house actually came from a health and occupant comfort rather than energy efficiency. It just, as it turns out, it goes really well together and very, I feel like there's a lot of pragmatic and it's performance based. So I think that each of those has their role. I would say, you know, energy code you have to do, and so that's often, and there's the California Green Building Code. So sometimes that lines up with a certification better than others, so you can go, okay, I'm 60% there just by complying with code, what could I do? And then it has to do with, you know, what are your priorities, what are you trying to, you know, for yourself or for what you're trying to communicate to others. Yeah, my thoughts.
Anybody want to add that? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say there's a whole bunch going on there too. You know, Ryan showed the photo of the passive house that survived. I think it was the Palisades. It wasn't certified, but it was built to the standard, which we don't certify every one of ours either because it costs money. And people often say, well, we don't want to certify, so what do we say? Well, okay, we're just going to build you a crappy house then. We're still going to build the same house, but we're just not going to do it. These things all do, you know, tiers of protection. I know Amy has heard me say like Occam's razor a lot. It's as a builder who shows up to a job site every day and says, Jesus, there's 5,000 things that are gonna go wrong today. How do I stop those 5,000 things from going wrong and still do the thing that I need to do successfully at the end of the day? So you're automatically like deductive reasoning all the things that could go wrong. And Passive House just happens to be, like you said, it wasn't set out that way. It was built by a bunch of scientists to save energy. But it turns out that having a closed up box with no ventilation, which that earlier question, my simple answer was just like, well, don't vent the roof, but you know, it's not, it doesn't apply to everything. But that said, they only go so far. We were talking earlier, you know, the heat in Altadena was between 1,500 and 2,000 degrees. It's not, there are houses that were built in 1930 right next to 7 houses that have nothing, and then that house just survived for who knows what reason, but it did. That passive house in Palisades survived, and they interviewed the guy, and he talked about the strategies, and he's actually like, he's a pretty cool guy, and he kind of at the end of it was like, well, we got 8-foot concrete walls around the whole thing too, so, you know, that's probably what helped more than anything else. So, there's different tiers, there's no panacea, I don't think, to every.
Yeah, that's
So-
a big part that we're battling with, right? Because you could have a concrete box or a metal box that you live in that's extremely fire resistant,
Yeah.
but not comfortable at all.
You're right,
Right?
yeah.
So I think like Mike and Andy said, it's less about the particular name or organization that represents it, but more about just looking at the parts and pieces and the end goal that you want to achieve there. Yep.
Just to add a little bit, historically, there's been the different code sets, and although we didn't really like the fire department's interaction with the building department were really on certain levels, and so they had the building code, and we really didn't dive too much into that. And now we're starting to see that there is a need to sort of come in and really start communicating better and really start to throw things into more consumer-friendly thing. And that's when, really, when you look at the WUI code, that was one of the things that the WUI code's trying to do with inside these fire hazard severity zones, is bring the building code in with the fire code, in with Title 14, which is the fire safety regulations, and now you have one spot where I'm looking at the same book as the building department, and now we're starting to understand, you know, where our differences were and where we're coming together and what we need to do. So right now, maybe we're having all these different, you know, names and this, but hopefully in the future, if we progress on this, we can get to where we need to go.
I want to see if I can maybe have us, I think we need to wrap up, and I want to leave it with a kind of a big question. These guys don't know that I'm going to ask them this question, but so it's going to be fun. So, you know, we're all hearing about affordability crisis around our energy costs, affordability crisis, and the lack of housing. We have climate hazards, especially here in our OA. If you're thinking about all this incredible experience that Bonnie just brought to us today, what is the thing that you might look forward to say, hey, if we can start doing this or continue to do this one thing, I know can't be just one thing, but try, like, how can we start to think more integrated about these problems and think about it? Is there something that comes to mind that you'd like to see us as a profession do or as the state do for us to help us achieve some of these big issues and the big goals? I don't know if anybody wants to start. Andy, do you want to start? All right.
Sure, because we're sitting in it, having this kind of cross collaboration in person, showing up. So I think that's huge. That's how we make connections. That's how we learn from each other and have both the ideas and the inspiration. I think one of the biggest is the implementation. Mike had mentioned about early on that when we were doing teaching and trying to connect and just say, we call them higher performance. We're saying, look, we're not trying to do everything in the world, we're just trying to do a little bit better, and it makes a really big difference. So I think being able to communicate consistently what are some key strategies, and make sure the folks who are doing the building are getting that message.
Brian, how are you?
Well, I don't know, I was just thinking, you know, in this community, we get to do the most incredible projects. We're in kind of this fake bubble, right? And it's kind of easy to push these incredible high performance or amazing structures because there's often a budget, right, that can do it and a desire to do it. And so the reality is that the majority of housing is not in this same situation. And so I guess just coming back to that idea of like, what is our responsibility as an individual to your neighbor around fire resilience or to the community? And I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I think that going back to the insurance question from John, I've had 2 or 3 small startup insurance companies reach out to Alan with a set of fire resilient parameters that need to happen on homes in the area in order to get this new insurance. And so my point is there are new businesses trying to capitalize on this in some ways, but in I think a positive way also, right? Where these big giants have just hung up the towel and said, nope, we're out. We're gonna see some change within that.
That's good to hear. Chris?
On a little bit different aspect, I think one of the biggest things, as we're starting to encroach more and more on our fire hazard severity zones, is really, we have to change what aesthetically pleasing to us. In regards to, no, I want to have my planner right here because it looks good. And it's like there's several different ways to get something that's really nice looking. And so we have to change that concept in it and work with the environment that we're in. And once we start really taking that on as a society, then I think we can start hitting these parameters a lot easier.
Okay, Mike?
I feel like each of those three answers could probably have their own like 2 hour. But kind of following up on Andy's is like, ignorance is unfortunately like a reasonable excuse, you know, but we're not ignorant to the answers anymore. Like, we're all in this room, we know what we have to do, we know a lot of what's causing a lot of these problems, and whether that's climate change or just climate chaos and a changing environment, we know this stuff is happening. We're all in here, we know the answers, and whatever side of the spectrum you're on, politicians know the answers as well. Like, this is not hard to do anymore. We have the solutions already, we're just not implementing them. And I don't know what stops people from implementing them. These are easy solutions. Natural homes last, we know that. It's been proven for centuries. Now we know that passive homes last. It's been proven time and time again, only for 30 years, but it's been proven. Why does it take 10 years for the state of California? I've been on the board of Passive House California for 4 years, I stepped away. Why does it take 10 years for the state to go, well, hell, maybe we should actually be thinking about that, when the people who are actually doing it are out there going, hey, we're giving you the information for nothing. We will give you all of our time for free. It's here, and they're not implemented.
Yeah.
So the solutions are there, we know them, but we need to implement faster. I mean, much faster,
Yeah.
like 10 years ago.
Awesome. That is amazing. Let's give these guys a big round of applause. I'm going to turn it over to Danica to finish this up in a second, but I also am just going to do a quick plug. We're also working for C-REN to develop their next sort of, what are they going to do on programs and business planning? And one of them is on their codes, on their trainings. And so I'm just opening the door. We're going to go to lunch. If you're interested in participating in a small group conversation about that to help inform some of the future programs that C-REN will be able to do, things like these kind of forums, please see me, and we'll take your name and we'll get in touch with you. So thank you guys, and I'm going to turn it over to Danica.
Raise your hand if you're going to the building tour. All right, awesome. So we will be doing a tour of the County of Santa Barbara Emergency Operations Center and Regional Fire Communications Center. So that will be from 1:30 to 2:30. The address is here on the screen, and if you want to scan these, it takes you to your navigation, and it'll be right there. And parking will be available surrounding the main building, and there will be an overflow parking lot, and we'll be meeting in the building's lobby. And if you get lost, call Juliana. So I'll wait 1 second for people to take pictures. All right, and then we would like your opinion in helping us shape our future regional forums. So we're gonna take like a minute or two for you to scan the QR code and fill out a survey. And if you want a physical hard copy of the survey, please raise your hand. Okay, I think we're good. So we're gonna take like a minute or two to do the survey, and after that, get your raffle tickets ready, and I will be winning the giveaway.